This is the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com and constructionbusinessaccelerator.com. My name is Todd DeWalt, and it's my job to help you, the construction business owner and leader, maximize profit and eliminate chaos in your business. I've got a great interview for you today with Michael Berke. He is a longtime builder and a former CFO, and now he helps get real estate development deals financed. So here's what you're going to learn in this podcast. You're going to learn about, first of all, one of the not so well-known tax credits that's available to home builders that you're going to want to jump on if you're a home builder, some common misconceptions about financing real estate deals, the surprising things that go on behind closed doors of loan committees that make decisions about financing real estate deals, what he means when he says the balance sheet and the property don't need to be perfect, but your character needs to be good. A couple of questions that you're going to want to ask every lender or investor that turn you down, and then how you can get a free look at a property. And more importantly, what can you do, or what are the steps to putting together a real estate development deal? This is a great interview. You're going to get a lot out of this. If you want to start developing your own properties, this is going to help you if you want to build your own backlog, or if you want to get involved with real estate development. This is an insider look at how real estate development deals get financed from a guy who's an expert. So before we get into that interview, I have a couple of resources that I do want to share with you. As a contractor, you manage a ton of jobs every day, and trying to keep up to speed and ensure that work actually gets done takes up way too much time. And that's where Company Cam comes in. Every photo and video your guys take at a job is automatically organized by location and instantly synced from the field to wherever you are. Now you'll know exactly what's happening across your company, be able to communicate more effectively, and cover your butt from future claims. Document your jobs, communicate with your crews, and protect your company, all with Company Cam, the only app every contractor needs. Company Cam is now totally free for small teams. Sign up is quick and easy, and there's no credit card required. Discover which plan fits your needs and get your company started at companycam.com/CLE. If you manage a project or a crew on a construction site, you know how important timely, clear communication is to keep your team safe and keep your projects on track. Over the years, many have turned to text messaging as a way to communicate with their teams and their subs. It gets information across quickly, and it's easy to use because everyone knows how to text. But these messages aren't stored in one place, and they're hard to manage and stay on top of. And because messages and pictures aren't saved, they're not organized, and they're not searchable, it makes it almost impossible to refer back to those conversations later in the event of a dispute. Well, there's good news, though. I recently discovered an app called Field Chat. Field Chat is a messaging app purpose-built for construction teams. It alleviates what I like to call the Bermuda Triangle of information between the field, the office, and the client. With Field Chat, all of your conversations on a job site happen in one place. Project managers can organize foremen, superintendents, and subcontractors by channels and start messaging using the mobile app or text. It also integrates with text messaging, so it's easy to include anyone in a conversation, whether it's someone on your own team that refuses to learn technology, or a trade partner or a sub that just prefers to keep text messaging rather than downloading something new. Where was Field Chat when I ran my construction business? I needed a tool like this to keep our operations running smoothly, instead of all the fragmented conversations that left important people out and commitments that were made that I could no longer find proof of. Here's what this tool means to you: more time, better documentation, less mistakes, and simplified dispute resolution. Field Chat is offering you, the Construction Leading Edge podcast listener, 15% off your subscription. Just go to fieldchat.com/edge. You can start your free trial right now and see how it feels to have communications that free up more of your time. Go to fieldchat.com/edge. All right, now let's get into that interview with Michael Berke. Enjoy. All right, Michael, thanks for being on the podcast. How are things going for you today?
Things are going great here out in beautiful Chicago.
Excellent.
Things are fantastic, and we're shelter in place, but we're doing good. We're doing good.
Good. Yeah, hopefully if you're listening to this in the future, you're like, shelter in place, what are you talking about? Well, we're not going to get into that, but these are definitely unique times during the COVID-19 pandemic. So let's jump into this. You work with a lot of home builders. You have an extensive experience in home building, real estate development, financing. We're going to talk about how finance deals are put together, how financing is put together in real estate deals, how to get involved with investing. This is a pretty common topic that I hear from a lot of construction business owners. But one of the things right now that people are really interested in is getting an economic stimulus, getting whether it's a refund on their workers' comp policy, reducing their overhead. And the reason that I reached out to you is because of something you posted on LinkedIn regarding tax credits that are available for home builders. So let's start with this question. What are some of the not so well-known tax credits available to home builders right now that they should or could be taking advantage of?
Well, the one tax credit that I've come across that's very appealing is a tax credit that was signed in December of 2019. What it does is it provides a retroactive tax credit if you meet certain standards. And the standards are a 2006 standard, the International Energy Conservation Code standard. And why this is so appealing is most builders who are building homes or remodeling homes today are gonna meet that standard. It's a 2006 standard. It was initially signed in 2006. It terminated in 2017 and was just signed up again. So it's kind of one of these under the radar tax credits that I was approached by somebody, did I know about this? And I didn't. And I said, boy, a lot of these builders and developers who I help finance projects, they're going to really be interested in this. So if you have 100 homes built in the last 3 years, each tax credit is $2,000 per unit. So that could be a lot of money, even 10 homes in the last couple of years. So there's a lot of benefits there, and yeah, like I said, the big kicker is most building standards today are going to meet this. So, and really, the way to submit for this, the way to apply for this, is there are firms, they're tax expert firms that specialize in this, and all you have to do is send them a PDF of your homes, specs and homes, your plans and specs, and they'll look at it and they'll give you a free analysis of whether they think there's a real good chance of you gaining these tax credits. So it's very easy. You can try to reach out to local accountants. I know some people who are who have done thousands of these, and there's certain IRS software for this, and they'll let you know.
Yeah, and I'll reach out. I'll send you an email, and if you can share some of those links, I'll put those links in the show notes for this podcast. If you're listening and you're interested in who to talk to about this, then check the show notes on that. Very interesting. And so these go back. How far back can builders go? How many years can they go back?
Well, it's 3 years. It's 2018, 2019, 2020. The homes have to be complete. Certificates of occupancy have to be in place, and that's it. And really, it could be apartment builders as well. It's up to 3 levels. So it could be condo builders, apartment builders. It could be rehabbers, single-family homes, and student housing, senior housing, any type of housing. could qualify for this.
And it's $2,000 per unit going back.
$2,000 tax credit per unit. Yes.
That's a nice economic stimulus.
Oh yeah. Yes.
I like that. Good. So let's before we get into what I think is going to be the real meat of this interview, where we talk about real estate finance and how to get involved with investing in real estate, how to put together your own real estate deals. Just talk briefly about your background and what you're up to currently.
Okay, so I provide financing for builders and developers around the country. I access capital, I tap sources, various private groups, banks, public companies, public institutions, large, small, family offices, a lot of various sources that I tap. And my goal is to help builders and developers with their projects. I started out, I was a home builder for about 18 years myself, builder and developer, CFO for a number of years as well. And I started out, my first real job out of school, I was a financial analyst for one of the largest banks in Chicago. So I wrote reports, I interviewed owners of companies, and I went to loan committees, and I was very involved in that as well. So I got a pretty good background on helping builders and developers finance their projects. So that's what I'm up to, and that's what I've done, and that's what I like doing.
Got it. So let's talk about, if you could give a basic overview of how a real estate deal comes together, whether maybe it's a multifamily deal, could be land development. What are for somebody who has no idea for how these deals get put together, can you just go over the basics of how a real estate project is financed typically?
Sure. So I'll take a step back for a second, and you have to understand the landscape of real estate finance for home builders. Okay, you have to understand the type of institutions, or the type of capital groups that will be interested in your specific deal, in your specific market. Okay, so I like to break it down, and most finance people do, into two categories. They're the sources of funds, and there's uses of funds. Okay, so these are two topics that all builders, anybody who wants to get into the home building business, or take the next step and get into a higher level home building, more development, more scale, has to break it down this way. So the sources are what I have said. You have to understand who the sources are. The sources are broken down into debt and equity. Okay, sources of funds. Who provides funds? These are the community banks. These are the regional banks. These are the private capital groups, the debt funds, the private equity groups, investors. They're all looking for deals. They're all looking for projects. And like I mentioned, on the equity side, there are investors looking for projects. There are these private equity groups who want to meet good builders who have interesting projects, and family offices, and they go on and on. There's pools of funds that investment groups put together, looking for various markets and various types of product to invest in. Okay, so those are your sources. And then your uses of funds. Okay, what are my uses for funds on this project? What's my acquisition? What's my cost? What's my development cost? What's my construction cost? What are my budgets? What's my interest carry? What's my time frames? Anything that has to do with costs. What are my soft costs? What are my architect costs? What are my engineering costs? What's my overhead cost? These capital groups, these sources they need to know. They need to know about your project and about your uses of capital. And that goes into how to get this financed. Okay, how do I get a project financed? So you do need to put a package or a summary together. And it should be a professional package with your budgets, with your cost analysis. And besides the budgets, it also needs to go into location and competition and comparable properties. And you really have to list the advantages to working with you on your project and why you're an expert and why these groups should go with you and work with you on your next deal. So there's a step before, and it could be a tenuous step putting all this together. But then you start meeting with financing sources, and that's a topic I'll touch on in a little bit. But really, you have to position yourself as an expert in your market. That's how you get financing. Okay, you are the expert in your market. If somebody needs to talk about housing in your area, you'd be the person to talk to, whether it's single-family homes, whether it's townhomes, whether it's rehabs, whether it's purchase homes and fix it up and flip homes. You just have to be the knowledgeable one, and they have to know that you are this guy. All right. So you position yourself with your package, and you know the landscape. And if you don't know the landscape, I could help you with the landscape. You could call on, you start with your community banks and you work to your private capital groups and to your equity people. And so really, like I said, when you meet with groups, when you meet these people, you have to put yourself in a position that you're the expert, and that you have to remember that these institutions and these private capital groups and these investors, they want to meet you. They want to meet builders who have had some success, who are the experts, who are knowledgeable. They want to put their money to use. Okay, banks won't stay in business. None of these groups will stay in business if they can't find good people to invest with.
I think that's a misconception that I know I had early in my career. I used to think that if I had a deal, I would have to convince them or had to pry money away from lenders, but they're actively looking for it. They want to deploy capital. That's how they make money. Couple of questions. You mentioned the word private equity, that there are private equity groups out there. What does that mean? What does that term mean, private equity group?
Okay, so you have your banks. Okay, everyone knows what a bank is. They're very conservative. Their loan to values, loan to costs are low, and they charge fairly low interest rates. They're very tightly wound in their underwriting. Every T is crossed, every I is dotted. Everything needs to be in place before they'll fund your deal. They have certain liquidity requirements. They have certain net worth requirements. They have certain parameters. When you move up to these private capital groups and private equity groups, things change. Okay, they're not regulated. Well, I'll talk about what I call private capital groups first. And I work with a lot of private capital groups. I do more deals with private capital groups today than banks. private capital groups are non-regulated. Okay, they act like banks, but they're non-regulated. They have larger institutional money that invest in them because they know that the institutional money knows that these private groups are experts in deploying capital to builders and developers. Okay, so these private capital groups, they're non-regulated, they're not as tightly wound, their parameters are different, meaning their net worth requirements are lower. Their liquidity requirements are a little lower. They're a little more. They'll look at the project a little more than the person, although they will look at the person. Everyone looks at the person. And it's funny. These private capital groups, as well as banks, I talk about parameters. I mean, some private capital groups want builders $1 million. The project has to be $1 million to $2 million. That's the only way we're going to invest in this. Others we only want to invest in $2 million to $4 million projects. In the latter, it keeps on stepping up. We'll only invest in $3 million to $6 million projects that has 25 or more homes or townhomes that'll finish in 2.5 years. Everyone's very specific. So the landscape is broad, and you just have to talk to these groups. All right. So that's on the debt side. On the equity side, it's the parameters are similar. However, they want much higher returns, right? These are private investors. These are high net worth individuals, private capital, private equity that take risks. Their deals are not secured by the real estate. Okay, you mentioned private equity. So they want higher returns, and I'll go into that in a second. So that's really how you differentiate banking institutions regulated to non-regulated private capital, private equity.
Gotcha. And what are, I mentioned misconceptions, and you touched on that, that lenders are actively looking for deals. That's one of the things that they're looking for. And I think a lot of builders probably think they don't realize that. What are some other misconceptions that you commonly run into with builders and developers that aren't experienced with financing projects?
One of the big ones is that I need the perfect property. Okay. I need the perfect property. It has to, everything has to work exactly as planned. I have to have not only perfect property, as my history has to be perfect. I have to have no projects that maybe didn't work out. And for anybody to finance me. And that's not true. Okay. If you're a home builder and developer with any experience, you've had some ups and downs. Everybody has had ups and downs. Okay. So lenders and private capital groups, they understand this, but they'll look at what you've done. They'll look at the downside. They'll look at the upside. They'll look to see how you position your company. They'll know your reputation in the marketplace, and they'll evaluate yourself, your company, your project. So that's a misconception. If you're an expert in your field, I know some of the smartest people that were experts in their business, in their home building business, that's took some lumps. Okay. Especially if you went through the recession 10 of 08, 09. Everybody did. So that to me is a misconception. And I talked about the property misconception. It's the same thing. I've seen gorgeous properties, gorgeous on lakes, in forest. The project, it didn't work. It just didn't work sometimes. That your price points were too high. You bought the land for too much money. And I've seen properties that they're okay. They're okay properties, decent schools, but your price points are perfect for a first-time buyer or for whatever market you're going at, and they knock it out of the park. So really, those would be a couple of misconceptions. You just have to really know your market, know your business, and just know what works.
So you mentioned that it's not all about the deal, it's not all about the person, and it sounds like the different sources look at that ratio. They put different weights on the deal and the person. So I'm curious, what if we're talking about banks, what weight does a bank put on the deal versus the person? Is it like 50-50 deal to person? Is it 80% person? And if we could talk about banks and then private capital groups and private equity, how they look at that, how they weight that, does that make sense?
Oh, no, it's perfect sense. So this brings me back to when I was a financial analyst at one of the biggest banking groups in Chicago. And I was very low on the totem pole. I wrote reports. I crunched numbers. I wrote reports. I interviewed CFOs and CEOs of these companies, and the reports were for loan committee. Okay, I would work with the lending officer, and we would go to loan committee. And I was allowed to go into these loan committees. Okay, which at the time I didn't think much of it, but now I understand the mindset in these loan committees, and this goes to exactly what you're saying. Okay, so we would present a deal. We'd present, this so-and-so builder, so-and-so developer, so-and-so manufacturer. It wasn't just real estate. Wants this finance, this property is financed. And in the end, you can crunch all the numbers. You could look at the project. In the end, well, what kind of guy is it? I mean, can you trust him? What do people say about him? Does he work hard? Is he trustworthy? It might not, his deals in the past might not have been perfect, but do people talk well of him? Is he a solid guy? Clean guy? It goes back to the person. So the balance sheets don't have to be perfect. Okay. The property doesn't have to be perfect, but your character needs to be pretty good. Okay. Your character, your ethic, and you have to show that you're really into this business, this product, and you do everything you can to make it the best project, the best product, but it's about you. So these loan committees and these decision makers, they do look at both. But if you're a high character guy, and although you might have had some bumps, but still, it doesn't mean you're not a high character guy. They will consider the project, even though the property. Now, the property still has to be right. Okay, there's appraisals, there's market studies, and they do all these things. and they'll look at your investment packages and your summaries and your timelines and your budgets, and they'll look at everything. And this is with both the banks and the private capital groups. But I guess the answer is they'll look at you character-wise first, okay, and they'll look at financial as well, maybe strongly, but maybe a little secondary, and they'll look at your project. It's a combination, but if you approach a bank or a capital group with a really good package and detail about yourself, and if you've had bumps in the road, you tell them you're up front. But now I have this project. Price points are perfect. Sales are X amount, are projected at 10 a month or 5 a month or whatever it is. You'll have their ear. And you have a chance.
So I think that would surprise some people to know that it's not all just black and white. It's all not just about the numbers. There's some gut feeling to it, some emotional part. So what percentage is the emotional part in these decisions? And then, let's start with that. Is it 2%? Like gut feeling, emotion? What do you think about this guy? Is it 20%? Can you give us a sense of how important that is?
Well, it's important, but the other parts are important as well. Okay, because banks, if they're public companies, they have shareholders, so you can't make a decision based on gut for shareholders. Private capital groups have institutions. They have to. If a project doesn't go well, they have to tell them why they made these choices. Okay, so even though there's final decision makers in these groups, everyone has somebody that they have to go back to. Mm-hmm. Okay, now that being said, if the appraisals come out, if the market studies come out, if your budgets look in sync with what's going on in your market, they will give a gut decision at the end. Okay, all things being equal, being your it looks like your project pencils out. But maybe if your liquidity is low, or if your net worth isn't where they usually want it to be. But boy, you've been around for a while and you've had some real good projects. They'll say, not everything is a perfect fit here, but he's a trustworthy guy, and let's just go. Let's do it. So and sitting in those loan committee meetings, it's funny that's the way a lot of it end. Yeah,
that reminds me of very early in my career. I worked in the estimating department for a large commercial general contractor, and on bid day, we would be bidding on a $5, $10, $15, $30 million project, and a few junior estimators like myself would have spent the better part of 2 weeks going over plans, doing detailed takeoffs on concrete and rebar, and detailed scopes, and pulling in information from subcontractors and trade partners and suppliers. And then inevitably, a vice president would walk in with 15 minutes before the bid was due, and he would kind of flip through and ask a few questions like, who else is bidding? What else do we have coming up? Kind of put a wet finger up in the air and, feel the juju or whatever was going on. Look at the science, what the adding machine gave us, and then he would say, write down some number down to 2 decimal places. That's our bid. Boom, ship it. And so there's this blend of the rational, the logical, the numbers, and then the gut feeling. And I think that I appreciate you sharing that. That surprises a lot of people how much the gut feeling comes in. I'm curious, what else surprised you about these loan committee meetings and how decisions are made on financing deals?
This is going back a while, but I have this as well. Today, I work. We'll talk about my more today than years ago when I was in the loan committee meetings, because I'm involved in decisions today in my business, helping builders finance their projects. One thing that I've found that goes a long way is not just showing capital sources your expertise, showing them on paper. I found that the verbal, telling them your expertise could push you over the top. Okay, so that could mean you do submit your package, and you do submit all your timelines and your budgets, and they go, and you do have some phone calls with them, but that's when it gets down close to the decision, that's when you really have to flex your knowledge and your muscle. Price per square foot, cost per square foot, acre, dollar per acre, on and on with the, absorption per month, per week. These are the buyers in the market at this price point for this. The move-up buyers are that price point. Townhomes are here, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. This is what's selling. This is what's not selling. These are the size of the bed. On and on. And you have that script ready, and prepare it. And most builders I found have this. They just have it in their head anyways. But to have the script ready, that could put you over the edge. Okay, and I have been surprised by deals that are borderline being approved, and a builder goes on a real pitch, a real just flexing his muscle on his knowledge. That could push it over. It really can.
That's great advice. Great advice. Very, very insightful. It's always fascinating to find out what goes on inside those rooms and behind closed doors. It's very helpful. So one question, let's go back to comparing, let's say a traditional bank. Are they putting, what percentage of weight are they putting on the person versus the deal?
Well, like I said, it really depends. It depends on the deal. It depends on the quality of the person, on the person's character. They will lean towards the person's character more than people think. Okay.
Got it. Well, let me ask that a different way. Which of the sources puts more weight on the person? The private groups will put more weight on the person. They're non-regulated, so the non-regulated groups. That's basically what it said. They're their own regulators. They're their own decision makers, and their investors are their own. Really will give them the parameters, and then these capital groups will adhere to them. So it's a little more loosey-goosey than the banks, and they have the option of a little more gut feeling. Although things do have to check out. Your financials have to be okay. Your liquidity, your net worth, it all has to be up to snuff, but maybe not as much as the banks. And they might look at the character a little more, at your experience a little more, and have a little more of a gut. Gotcha. Good. So the next question is, how do you find these people? So banks are pretty easy to find. You can find them at every corner. But private capital groups and private equity, certainly I've never seen a billboard or an advertisement for those types of organizations. How would one go about finding a private capital group or private equity?
Okay, so I'm going to take a step back to how to help builders and developers finance their projects and how to find the right people. Okay, so the time to start looking and meeting with these groups is before you have a project. Okay, you have to just start to meet and network with these groups, because what happens is, not only do you begin to perfect your presentation and perfect how to present yourself, doors start to open. If a particular bank says, that's not really what we do, what we look at, always ask, well, can you recommend somebody else? Do you know anybody else? Because they travel in the same circles, all right? Banks, capital groups, investors, private equity, and they might know. They might know other groups. And really, like I said, the time to start speaking with lenders is before you have a project. Okay, so you have a project, you have a current project, you're midway through, and you need to get a feel. You want to take a step up. Let's say you want to grow your business. You want to do a development deal. You want to have do 20 homes in a project, 50 homes in a project. But maybe that's not what you've been doing exactly. So you want to take a step up and meet with these banks. Okay, and you could find them. The community banks are a good place to start. Like I said, they want to meet with you. They spend money on advertising to meet with people just like you, and get to know what their parameters are. Do they, like I said before, are they 2 million and under deals? Are they 2 million to 5 million? Are they 5 million plus? What are their loan to costs? Are they 70% loan to cost? Are they 60% loan to cost? And then you don't have to tell them about a project you're looking at specifically. Okay, the idea is to get a feel for the landscape for you of the banking and financing area. So you could tell them, there's a 20-acre parcel in so-and-so city that I've been looking at. I don't have it under contract. How would you look at a deal like that? I could build 25 homes. I could build 30 townhomes. How would you look at that? And the bankers and they'll always say, well, what's the address? Where's the property? You don't have to tell them. You don't have to tell them. But you could look. But you are, in your mind. I know builders and developers. We're always looking at the next project. You could say there's a property. It's confidential for now because I don't have it under contract. But how would you look at that? And what would you need from me? And how much money out of pocket or from investors would I need to have, in your opinion? And they'll give you believe this is what they do every day. They'll tell you exactly what the builder needs, how much experience the builder needs, what the cost needs to be, and they'll tell you about their approval process. And it's a real good way to meet these groups, okay? And you don't start when you have a project. You start before you have a project, okay? And I'm talking to builders and developers, and being a builder developer in the past, boy, a lot of time is spent on this. It's part of being a builder developer. It could be up to 30% of your actual time on a daily basis is talking to these groups and striking out with these groups and being rejected and going to the next one. But in the meantime, perfecting your pitch a little bit, perfecting your investment summary a little bit. And finally, you get to one and and bam, everything's come together. It's all aligned, and you can get the financing. You have a real shot at it. So I hope that answers.
Well, that's good. So the first step would be if somebody wants to start developing their own projects, the first step would be before you have a project, before you get committed to a project, start building relationships, start talking to bankers, and start understanding what they want. What does winning look like in their world? They'll tell you what their expectations are. So these deals, the typical, correct me if I'm wrong, but a typical bank will say, we'll do 70 or 75% loan to cost. So if a project costs $1 million all in, they'll loan 75%, which means you need to come up with the other 25%, which in a lot of cases, in my experience, has been from private equity, personal cash, private capital groups, et cetera. Let's say somebody meets with a banker and the banker says, yep, we like the deal. We like you. This fits our parameters. You need 25%. How would you advise somebody to start looking for that 25% if they don't have that cash in the bank?
Okay. So the way that's the equity piece of these deals. The banks and the private capital groups are the debt side. This is the equity side. So a lot of on that 25% of equity, investors are interested in coming in with you, okay, in being a part of your team, helping your project, making a nice return, and maybe doing a next one, okay? So a lot of times, investors, there's what's called a 90-10 rule or an 80-20 rule, okay? Investors will put in 90% of that equity of the 25%, okay? Say you need $250,000 of equity in your case. They'll put in 90% or 80% of that, but they still want you to have money in the project, okay? They'll want you to have at least 10 or 20% of that equity out of your pocket or out of somebody close to you's pocket, okay? In skin in the game. So I in your example, the 250,000 equity, they'd want, say $50,000 out of your pocket, 25,000, 50, whatever it might be. And so you have to raise it. Nobody's very rare where you're going to be able to piece this together for 100%. Okay, those days are long past. They will look for skin in the game, and the banks and the private capital groups, they don't care that much how you get the 25%. Okay, they do want you to have some skin in the game, but they look to you to raise it, and it's these equity groups that will say, we're not going to put up the whole thing. You have to put in some yourself. So I wanted to go into how, you asked how builders start to develop property and what they should do. The first step, in my opinion, is talking to these financing sources and equity investors all the time. It's got to be almost a daily ritual. Okay, it's got to be a habit. I need to call one or two today. Let's see if I could set up a meeting. Let's see if let's see who's responsive. Let's see who's lending. Let's see. It just has to be a habit, and you have to be ready to be rejected. The best projects are rejected. Okay, it just might not fit these lenders' parameters. Okay, like I said. So I want to go to the next step of what a builder developer needs to do for his project. And that step is to find the property and to put it under contract. Okay. So what builders and developers, if you haven't done this before, developing property and buying a larger parcel, is you could put deals under contract with no risk. Okay, you could tie up properties, say for 60 to 90 days with no money spent. Okay, you enter to you find a property, you find the seller, you have a sense for the zoning, how many units you could put in, and you put down a deposit with the seller and you enter into a contract. Okay, now this is a refundable deposit. Okay, it might be, it depends on the scope, but it might be 25,000, it might be 10,000, it might be 50,000, but it's non-refundable in 60 days. It's what we call you get a free look. Okay. And during that free look, during those days, you do your due diligence. You hit the banks hard. You put your capital sources hard. You find out, can I do this? Okay, now it's game time. Okay, you have a contract. You have your deposit, your non-refundable deposit. Refundable deposit. And you have your budgets together, you know your market, you know your product, you have your package, and now you're going back to these banks. And you know them, hopefully. You've had they remember you, or you could spur their memory, or you call new ones as well. But that's why it's so important to have some, when you don't need the money, at least start to meet people, okay? So now you have 60 days and you go hard. And then after your due diligence period, you do a market study, or you talk to all your realtors in the area. You do everything you can, because in that 60 or 90 days, what happens is your deposit goes hard, it's called. And that means you're going to lose it. It's done. And you have to close in, say, another 3 months. Okay, that's your closing date. So your $25,000 deposit, your $50,000 deposit, you have to make a decision. At that point, should I go through with this deal? Okay, because if I can't get the financing, or if I can't get the zoning, I'm gonna lose my deposit. And a lot of these contracts are structured, well, in another 30 days, you got to put more money down, and they kind of build on each other. And then as you move through the progression, you're getting your zoning approved, and you're spending money on land plans and on engineering and on architects and on zoning attorneys, and so there's more money to be spent. Okay, and then you go to close after your entitlements are in place. But you can get that free look, okay? So that's for people who haven't done this before, and everybody knows it. It's standard in the industry, and sometimes just start doing things. Get a free look. Put yourself in that position. See what you could find with some of these lenders and capital groups. See how close you can get. And you know what? So you spent a little money on attorney's fees for a contract. You get your money back, and it's just the way things work, and everybody knows it.
That's
what I would advise.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think that's probably, if you've never done it before. And I know the first real estate deal I didn't understand how that went down. But I think a lot of people make the mistake of buying a property and really gambling on making some big bets on things like zoning. They buy a property and then they try to get the entitlements. And if it doesn't work out, they're stuck with a piece of property they can't develop. And the answer is, like you were saying, put it under contract, have options, buy or go ahead and lock in some extensions if you need to, and then, then do your due diligence and decide. But that makes a lot of sense. So that's a great primer on how to get started, and probably addresses some misconceptions about it. Let's talk about, you mentioned the 2008 recession. I want to talk about, I always like to talk about lessons learned, especially from somebody who survived the recession. So what were some of the biggest lessons that you learned? If you had to pick one or two big lessons that you would share with home builders and contractors that you learned from the 2008 recession, what would that be?
Well, I can give you my experience, what I've seen at that time, and really, it's any downturn, any project that might have gone south. Some things that I think could help, really help builders and developers. Okay, first thing would be, on that 25% equity piece, don't put all your money in the deal. Okay, even if you can. Okay, that's where, I mean, you have to make the decision, and you have to know your own financial capabilities. But what I've seen in downturns is people that put, okay, I have a bank and I'll use my own equity. You know, I've done fairly well and I could do it. I don't want to pay investors all these high returns. Bring in investors, okay? Because save your cash, put your cash away for a rainy day, put your cash towards other projects. Let the investors come in for 60, 70% of the equity amount, or 80, or whatever your threshold is. Let them do it. I've seen builders just try to do it. They don't want to pay 20% IRRs with the equity, or whatever it might be. So that's a big one. Okay, save have a rainy day fund. Have your money socked away for these type of situations. Okay, and there's ways to do that. You could build in fees for yourself in these homes. Okay, there's other ways to kind of help you cash flow and make money along the way. So that would be one. Okay, bring in partners, bring in investors. The biggest and the best do it. Okay, so that's one. Another one is your transparency with your lenders and your investors. Okay, so you're doing a project, you're building a home, you're building some spec homes, you're doing a townhome project or development, and things aren't going well in the economy. Your projections you're behind on your timelines, and things aren't. You're not going to complete your project in the 3 years that you told your bank, that you told your investors. The time to go back to your banks, to your capital groups, to your investors is right away. Okay, it's not to wait to see, well, maybe things will turn around. I know I have these interest payments coming up. I'll maybe go to my cash, and I'll start paying, instead of using company cash flow. I'll go to my cash and start paying interest payments, and maybe I'll get a little line of credit somewhere, and I'll get more debt, and I'll be able to pay. No, that's a big lesson. Is go early back to your banks and say, hey, Mr. Banker, Mr. Capital Group, very soon I'm going to have a hard time paying these interest payments. Okay, sales just aren't going as projected. How can we work together? What can we do together to make sure we both come out okay here? And you'd be surprised. Okay, these banks, they'll say, okay, what if I freeze interest for a few months for you. Okay. What if I increase the term instead of 3 years? Let's add another year. Would that help? Maybe I'll increase an interest reserve for you as well. Okay, I'll give you another $50,000 for an interest reserve on your project. But you're in this together. Okay. Now the mistake, the lesson is in the last recession, it went down the road. Okay, and the builders and developers called their lending sources and said, you know what, I just can't make next week's payment. I can't do the interest payment. And it becomes more adversarial. Okay, well, why not? Why don't you tell us what's going on? You know, you're telling us you're going to default on our loan terms. You know, you're giving me 4 days notice, and it becomes, like I said, it becomes adversarial. Some banks, you know, they will try to work with you. Banks and capital groups do not want to own this stuff. They don't want to take it back, but go back early, and try to work together, and they're receptive to this. So those are the two biggest lessons that I've seen in downturns or down projects.
Great advice. What's one other mistake that you see builders and developers make commonly when dealing with banks and investors?
I think a big one is that everything's going to be perfect. Okay, here's my project. It's going to sell out for sure. It's a no-brainer. This is what's selling. There's no competition. No one builds like I do. You know, these banks and investors and capital groups, they're very sophisticated. Okay, they know that there's risk. Okay, so it's smart, in my opinion, to tell them some of the obstacles that might be along the way. You know, so-and-so builders building down the street. Okay, they're building fairly close to the same project as ours. Okay, and they're going to attract some of my clients, some of my customers. But you know what? I do this in my homes. I can bring it in at this price point, and you know, I'm very confident that it's going to sell out. But you point out some of the negatives. Okay, you point out that the competition, and any other things like that. And you know, if there is a builder, and there's an advantage to that, what I found is if there's a builder building down the street, and there are all the time, there's big builders competing with the small builders, and it's with all their money and you know, all the marketing money the bigger builders or builders down the street put in, they bring people to your city. They bring people to your street, and you can feed off that. So that's kind of a negative turning into a positive. But that's another mistake that sophisticated investors and banks, they know it's not, you know, all rainbows and sunshine all the time with these projects. So tell them the things that could go wrong, but tell them how you plan on overcoming them. Okay, that's my thoughts.
Yep. Hit the objection head on, talk about it. Yeah. Always
Exactly.
good advice.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we are running out of time, and this has been fantastic stuff. I really appreciate the detail and the insight you've shared. So let's do this. Let's talk a little bit tell us a little bit about what you do and your company, and then how you can help builders, and where should they go if they want to contact you, follow you, or get in touch with you.
Sure. Well, again, my name is Michael Berke, and I have a real estate financing firm. It's called Tempo Capital Group, TEMPO Capital Group. I'm based in Chicago, and I help builders and developers finance their projects around the country. I access capital. I tap resources that I've developed over the years as a builder and as a financing provider on a daily basis. I'm always looking for new capital sources, always seeking new investors, private groups, private debt, private equity, family offices, high net worth individuals. That's what I do. And I have a real good understanding of the home building business for being a builder for a lot of years. So, you could contact me, and I could help you navigate this financing. And you could find me at tempocapitalgroup.com, and I'd be glad to talk to you about anything you want.
Fantastic. Great stuff. Is there anything else anything we missed? Any gaps in the conversation? Any questions I should have asked that we need to cover before we wrap this up today?
We covered a lot of the topics that I think are important. I know you're involved in the operational areas of builders, and these financing sources do look at that. They do look at your team. They do look at how you operate. They do look at your efficiencies, and they want to know that the people that they and the groups and the builders that they invest in, they are staffed with experienced people, and they are their overhead is minimized and efficient, and they will come out and they will talk to you and they'll look at you, and so that's a point too. Is internally, you have to live up to being just the best in your market.
Great advice. Michael, I really appreciate it. This is great stuff. So if you want to find out more, go to tempocapitalgroup.com, correct?
Yes.
And then I'll have links in the show notes for this. But I really encourage you to reach out and talk to Michael. Michael, I appreciate this. This has been tremendously helpful. This is like what is going on behind the curtain, in the Wizard of Oz. It's magical. It's mysterious to most people who've never been there. And this has been really enlightening. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
You got it, Todd. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. For all the links and the show notes from this interview, some of the highlights, go to the podcast player that you're listening to this on, find the show notes, and go get in touch with Michael. Go to his website, tempocapitalgroup.com, connect with him, and he can help you out. Be sure to check out those resources that I mentioned earlier in the podcast. And as always, I appreciate the ratings and the reviews. If you could take a moment and leave a rating and or a review on the podcast player of your choice. And if you could share this podcast with somebody. If there's somebody you know that is interested in financing deals, or if they're just interested in leadership, construction, making the industry better, if you could send them a text, share this podcast with them, with anybody you think that would get value out of it. And if there's anything I can help you with, go to my website, constructionleadingedge.com, and schedule a free call with me. Send me a message. Let me know what I can do to help. Otherwise, I will see you next time.